Ghanaians believe that their transformation will not occur on the back of parties, but on the back of leadership. It's a question of leadership.
Welcome to today's edition of Alan Speaks, relative to the youth policy, the young people, by Honorable Alan Kojo Kyerematen when he becomes the President of the Republic of Ghana. Today we are looking at macro, that if we will be able to implement all the youth policies, then it must be in consonance with how well we man Kojo Kyerematen to explain to us.
Right.
So today we are looking at macro general overview of the...
Thank you very much, because of the failed economic policies of the current government. But it goes beyond that. The economy is in crisis also because of the structural vulnerabilities that have been occasioned over the years by some of the policies that have been adopted by successive governments. So what we find now with our economy cannot only be attributed to the NPP and the way they've handled the economy.
It's perennial.
It goes back many years.
Right.
And it goes back many years because we've not been able to transition our economy into a producing and productive economy. You know, that's what we call structural transformation.
Okay.
Before you can achieve sustained, resilient growth over an extended period of time, you need to have to go to the IMF the 17th time. It means that there's something fundamentally wrong with it. It will seem to us that we are doing well, but we'll always go back, and it will be back and forth. And that is why the GTP has taken the position to really transform our economy. And to do it,
Right.
one is the macroeconomy.
Okay.
When you talk about the macroeconomy, there are certain amount or not. One is inflation.
Right.
The other one is your currency, your debt levels, interest rates, and monetary policies we call the macroeconomy, microeconomy.
Right.
So at the microeconomy level, you are getting to the enterprise level. If the macro is sound and robust, the micro would respond.
Right. Beautiful foundation.
Yeah.
And so it gives us an opportunity to now delve into the varied aspects of the macroeconomic indicators that your framework that you are talking about. I am happy that you've highlighted that we have some structural vulnerabilities, and it is as a result of that. That is why consistently, all the governments we've had specifics.
Okay.
And the first thing that comes to mind will be expenditure management. Oftentimes we hear that we borrow money, we generate money internally, but the conversation has been about what we use the money for.
Yes.
And so I am happy that, the policy in itself is telling us how you intend to address the expenditure loophole that we have relative to the macroeconomic situation. So can you explain to us, how you intend to do that? First of all, identifying the problem and also telling us how you intend to do that respectfully.
Very well. The reason why it's always important to start with expenditure management and control is the fact that if you spend more revenue, that becomes the basis for spending.
Right.
But if you are spending more than the revenue that you have, then you have a budget deficit. And when you have a budget deficit, a prudent management of the economy would require you first to limit, you have the basis for being able to have a balanced budget. Obviously, if you have more revenue, it allows you to spend
more.
But then the only way you can spend more is to control your expenditure. If you control your expenditure, then you can spend more. So expenditure management and control is fundamental to any macroeconomy. So the GTP is saying that let us now identify the specific control and management. And as I indicated in our first chart.
Right.
So you can make reference to specific, if you read, it says, enforce existing legal and regulatory regime on fiscal ceiling to ensure that the budget deficit does not exceed 5% of the GDP.
Right.
So I've talked about how is it. Now, what existing legal requirement which restricts any government from going beyond 5%, that's the budget deficit as a ratio to GDP, that you have to remain within the target. Should we go beyond this target of 5%, the budget deficit? That ain't more than is there's an existing legal framework.
The implementation of which
has been consistently had to go to Parliament. So under normal circumstances, approval to exceed this limit. Now, so how do we avoid going to Parliament to seek approval to exceed?
Absolutely.
Yes.
So we've to establish a lean but efficient government by reducing the current size of government, including limiting the number of ministerial appointments to not more than 40 ministers.
So what we are stating now is that you want to limit your expenditure as a government and the size of your government. How is it that a country of 32 million people, a relatively moderately small country, has over 100 ministers? And that's all a lot of money. If you look at the compensation package for a minister, you can understand the need for reducing the size of your government. Every minister has to be provided with a 420 land cruisers for ministers. If you're talking about 100 ministers, do the arithmetic and you see how much it involves. Now, a minister is also entitled to a saloon car. Consolidate the compensation of not just ministers but other political appointees. No one would need to convince you that if you want to control expenditure and manage your expenditure, the number.
We're looking at monthly salaries of the number of ministers we have. That means that you are, well over your budget.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes. So, and I'm happy that you are looking at reducing the numbers to 40.
Yes, to 40.
But what will your government be able to function?
The argument that every government would try to advance is that you need a certain number of ministers to be able to do the work of government. Yes, that is so. But what you need is an look at the structure of it. You can understand why that is completely feasible. For a very long time, economic planning, trade and industry are intrinsically related. They go together. If you have a finance minister that does not have an understanding of what industry and trade can bring to the finances of our economy, then there will always be a problem. The Minister of Finance will move one way, industry, trade, that is production, and under the GDP. We are consolidating finance country. We have telecommunications infrastructure, we have roads, we have rail, we have ports, different and be consolidated. So basically, you are looking at infrastructure.
Right.
And so we have now consolidated a number of those infrastructure-related ministries into one ministry.
Okay. So,
and then you can have under the minister who then oversees the entire infrastructure regime, having one or two deputies to look at specific
areas.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, and I think it dovetails into rationalizing and consolidating existing government departments, agencies, and other public sector organizations with overlapping mandates.
Very well.
And so what you're saying is that if we're able to streamline the ministries and reduce them to 40, ostensibly, we are also looking at streamlining the other departments and parastatals that falls under these ministries.
Exactly.
For the purposes of, reducing the numbers, but also ensuring efficiency.
That's exactly what it is. So this second proposal that you just alluded to is that once you consolidate the sector ministries, then by extension, you can now also consolidate the agencies and departments under these ministries. Let's take a typical example.
Very well.
Ministry of Energy. Does it make sense that you have so many? You have the Petroleum Commission, you have NPA, National Petroleum Authority, each other. So you can you have ECG, you have VRA, you have Gridco, you have NEDCO. So immediately, if you just take one example of the energy sector, you can see that these institutions you can save with this consolidation only in one sector. Only one sector. The amount of money that is saved, not just from compensation, but operational expenses. And one of the entry points for corruption in the public sector is also
oversight.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's what the second proposal is speaking to. You reduce the number of sector ministries, and then by extension also you consolidate the departments and agencies under those ministries. By the way, if you get ministers that I would say appointments, then you have 35. And why would you then go beyond that to as much as 100?
Job for the boys. Perhaps job for the boys.
But that's a cost to the economy.
Put square pegs in round holes.
Yes, that's a cost to the economy.
So you are going to be very prudent.
Because of the effect of expenditure management and
government's spending.
Yes.
So we are saying that you want to, your target is around 10%. You're not looking at going beyond 10% for a period of 5 years.
Yes.
Can you explain to us, first of all, what you mean by that public expenditure? You're talking about capital expenditure or just normal public expenditure without necessarily it leading to some capital expenditure? Can you explain
basically, it is both.
Okay.
Capital expenditure and non-capital expenditure.
Okay.
So that constitutes public expenditure.
Very well.
And globally, there are standards or benchmarks that are, when you look at global standards, you find that an efficient government would have to have a certain ratio of public expenditure to GDP. So the GDP is in line with global standards, proposing that the ratio of public expenditure to the GDP is a limitation on public expenditure if you want to remain within this threshold, just like with the budget deficit.
Right.
Yes. So that's the value of putting this target in the GDP.
Yeah, and that ultimately finds expression in one of the greatest enemies to our economic well-being, as in 4,144.80 Ghana cedis annually to ghost names. How do you intend to address this challenge of ghost names?
It looks like you've done your homework. So what happens is that public sector officials that have their salaries paid from the Controller and Accountant General would every year have to be mandated and reviewed for you to be able to collect your salary or to be paid through the Controller and Accountant General's department. But strangely enough, for a very long time, successive governments, you have individuals who have been paid as part of, let's say, the public sector agencies, including the ministries. In some cases, they actually ghosts because they are deceased. You know, they are deceased. But in some cases also, people who do not work in those institutions find their names on the payrolls of those agencies. And it's been a major source of drain on public finances, employee compensation management and administration.
Okay.
In many cases, the mechanisms for enforcing payroll management administration, in many cases, those mechanisms are there. It's a question of enforcement. And with the right leadership, if you enforce those existing payroll management and administration mechanisms, you significantly reduce the effect of ghost names. So that's what we are proposing.
Now, it's quite interesting that if you look at the losses that we incur as a nation due to ghost names, we are looking at the causation or the causal factors. Have highlighted that as part of the things that you're going to do, you ensure that you have some strict internal controls and payroll management systems, which is brilliant. You know, because you've identified that, look, governments have tried, because every time we hear governments say that,
talk about these ghost names.
Exactly. So, I mean, it's commendable that you are saying that you're going to strengthen, you know, these internal payroll systems in order that you'll be able to address these challenges. Also, lack of proper verification and validation of employees. You know, can you speak a little bit about that?
Yes, because it ought not to be a complicated matter. If you have 10 employees, you have 10 employees. But now you can use artificial intelligence and blockchain technology to trace the causal relationship or the linkages between these individuals, their payee structure, that's pay as you earn, that's their tax commitments, to their national ID, and to so many other things that the individuals are able to do to access public services. So once that integration through digitalization, once that is done, it is much easier for you to be able to really get to the bottom of these ghost names. I mean, but Kewode, in matured economies, do you ever hear about ghost names?
I do not.
I mean, so people have an interest in it. People have an interest in it, and the fact that it keeps on occurring, you know, means that there's no political will to seriously address the problem. Because look at the numbers that you were quoting.
Absolutely.
If indeed that is affecting your capacity to spend on government projects because you are paying ghost workers, then you have to take this very seriously. And in this modern world, it is the easiest thing to do.
I'm more interested in this because, I mean, government has tried to introduce an electronic payment system to be able to address this, but it appears that it's still a recurring matter, you know. So would you rather perhaps maybe in your implementation of this policy adopt an approach where you are going to prosecute people and make sure that you crack the whip and bring discipline in that space?
Very much so, because it is linked to some other parts of the GTP. When you look at my proposals for public sector reform, another,
right?
Because people really supervise the payment to ghost names. Because if you are in charge of a ministry and through the audit system, it is found that there were a number of ghost names appearing on your payroll account, and nothing happens to you, either to the minister or to the director of finance in that company, in that public sector institution, then obviously they will find another mechanisms to deter people. But it's also the sanctions associated with this. If you have a situation where there is no sanction regime and public servants, civil servants, can get away with how they manage the compensation mechanisms of a public agency, then that is serious. It's the sanctions that will impose, just for the sake of argument. You had a 30-year jail sentence for any public sector official who is found to be responsible for colluding, and that deterrence alone and the sanctions is so severe. I have no doubt in my mind that people will start thinking again.
All right, don't move a muscle.
I say, you be who know me who be I say, the echo so the so when I say, obi the question about baby me. I say, the ref is a bit dry I say, Alan Cash. I say, in this car call us upon wine. I say, and the car labash. I say, that's a blue and bar. I say, never pie balu. I say, my hand in the bride. I say, everything I do. I say, before shine your eye. I say, before you shine. I say, I say, Munjai I say. I dey come like Alan Cash. Alan Cash. Plenty money for my bank. For my bank. I say. I say. I say. Punjai I say. I say. I dey come like Alan Cash.
This is Alan Speaks Primetime Show. My name is Kwame Owusu Danso. Before the break, welcome back. This is Alan Speaks of the macroeconomic policy in the Great Transformational Plan. One very important, or rather burning question that I have, we've heard the canker of sole sourcing. We've heard so many other aspects of procurement that we don't, processes that we don't comply with. Now, let us understand many issues, irregular procurement processes.
True.
Very well.
And one of the biggest challenges for government is how much money we lose through government procurement. Now, when government administers the procurement of goods and services, let's say road contract, paid for a government contract. Now, if in the process of factors there's an incidence of manipulation and fraudulent, the cost to government in the sense that Act was followed, costing government $10. It means government has to pay $10 for a service or set of goods which ordinarily
could have been bought for
$1. So government is spending $9 additional than they ought to. So it's a major source of loss of revenue to government. And because literally in a government that is in control of literally everything, that's where the problem comes from. If the economy that you are running is in the hands of government, then every service, every, I would say, activity is dominated by government providing the funding to have that service provided. Then obviously the contracting for these services, outsourcing makes it even easier for government, and they can
benefit from it.
They can benefit from it.
Tied to this is the issue of conflict of interest.
Yes.
Closely tied to this is the issue of conflict of interest. And recently, I'm sure you may have heard conversations about this SNIT scandal.
Yes. Yeah.
And if you check, you realize that the procurement process had some issues. People raised concerns about the procurement process. Now, what when politically exposed people get themselves involved in some of these procurement dealings? Nothing happens to them.
Yeah.
In the final analysis, when we are able to identify that they may have gotten the contract by reason of their closeness to power, we just say, oh, it is just by reason of the association. It's not necessarily conflict of interest. What is your definition of conflict of interest? But it is precisely there was sole sourcing. So how would you balance that when you get the opportunity to rule us? Because it's a major issue. People get contracts. We give contracts to people who do not deserve it.
Yes.
You know, and we use these sole sourcing processes to be able to do that. So how would you, are you going to crack the whip so hard that people will even be afraid to get closer to some of these deals?
So Kwame, we've thought through different entry points for dealing with this problem.
Very well.
And we've come to the conclusion that the most viable and productive way out of this is to put an end to sole sourcing. And that is what this proposal is about.
Right.
It says eliminate sole sourcing in public procurement of contracts. So exactly as you said, and then it is free for all. Whatever they quote, because it's sole sourcing, it will go through. There's supposed to be value for money audit associated with sole source, but almost invariably it doesn't work. So if you want a way out, you cannot depend on the individuals to respond to the I would say that they will not, us as being, then it is not there. And everybody then has to bid for every project. So this is, in our view,
and it's a brilliant one,
yes,
to be honest. If it is not there, then we will not even have that conversation. One will also be quick to ask with respect if that will also not be problematic, considering that in some areas, you want to explain that, okay, please.
No, I mean, you're right.
Considering that, in some respects, you may want to engage in sole sourcing for the purpose of expedition. You have a project that you must execute quickly, and that is, or timeously, and that is the only way you can get people to.
I'm happy you are processing it, and we've always relied on this logic that in situations where time is of excess, in a situation where the intellectual property rights associated with a particular delivery of service might require you to sole source. We have thought through all that.
Okay.
And it is against that background that one would have expected that it is only in exceptional circumstances that you have to do sole sourcing, as you've rightly pointed out.
Right.
Out of exigency. you have no choice but to do sole sourcing. Unfortunately, people have taken advantage of these so-called exceptional cases. And now, instead of it being exceptional, now it has become the order. Government keeps talking about that we have to deal with sole sourcing. We have to deal with sole sourcing. It's not happening.
Right.
I know NPP was very vehement about the use of sole sourcing by the NDC. Yes. But in the current government and administration, it is obvious that in many cases they have had to resort to sole sourcing. You know, I'll be the first to admit that it is true that in some very specific cases that you may have no choice but to sole source. So what this proposal means.
Okay.
So because what we are trying to
is to
do
eliminate
the influence of public of whether sole sourcing is appropriate or not.
Indeed.
So once you, and it has to be done, it's only the president that can approve of it. Because the buck stops with him.
I think viewers of Balance Speaks
it's a big issue.
So let's proceed and look at the other, including enterprises who commit governments to control Ministry of Finance. It does happen?
Yeah, it does happen. And again, just to bring our viewers back to focus in the public sector. You prepare a budget, then you have the authority to spend based on that approval. But almost invariably, and government officials who commit government to financial contractual obligations that have not been first budgeted for and have not been approved by government. That in itself is against the Public Financial Management Act. It is not allowed. Strict regulations against those who do this, and it is so widespread that if we don't crack the whip, nothing will happen. So this is making sure that under no circumstances can any public sector official commit to spend what has not been budgeted for and approved. This is basic fundamental requirement in public financial sector management.
Service, some ambulance have indicated you were smiling when you saw it. You said, you see, that's why I put this thing here, so that no payments will be made until it is fully and finally approved and until the work is done. Not so. Yeah, but it appears that these things have been happening, and we are losing so much.
And it's a mark of a financial management, significant, that we can no longer pay lip service.
You can't reverse these things.
We can't pay lip service to these things.
Right.
So it is a major policy intervention under the GTP.
Very well. Now let's that I really do like, to enhance the management of earmarked statutory funds by eliminating the capping system. And we know what the capping system has done, especially to the common fund. So how do you intend to do that? Are you going to reverse whatever has started under this administration, which obviously has not been able to help, in terms of bringing about proper development and things like that? But most importantly, also in looking at this, what makes me excited is the fact that it's actually also looking at expenditure and how we can manage it.
Yeah, very much so.
But if you want to reverse it, then are you not saying that we should spend more now?
There are what we call these statutory funds.
Very well.
These funds were created under the public sector financial management system to ring fence funds from the consolidated fund for specific activities. So to a large extent, GET fund, for example, has been a major vehicle. I would say CD under the GET fund was part of the consolidated fund. There is no certainty that there would have been money left in the consolidated fund to finance education. So these statutory funds in by themselves are now, so when monies are ring-fenced and put into the common fund, to the earmarked funds, one would have expected that we should reserve those funds for the purposes. Former Minister for Finance, his view was that these monies are being ring-fenced from the consolidated fund, and as Minister for Finance, his hands are tied, because when monies are deployed into these funds, what is left in the consolidated fund is basically meager. So he brought a suggestion then that we should cap the amount of money that can, for example, the total monies going into these funds was, let's say, 30% of the statutory funds going, or consolidated fund going to statutory funds. Then he says, oh, let's cap it. You cannot pay more than, because in his view, the use of the statutory funds themselves was that of the. Why would we do that? Because if we reverse the existing situation and bring more money into the consolidated fund,
cap,
yes,
essentially.
Yes, and then also, what do we? There's no certainty as to how the monies will be used.
Okay.
From the consolidated fund. So it's the use of the statutory funds are regulated. So this proposal just so that we to enhance
the management
of
earmarked or statutory funds.
Then the statutory funds ensure that we are using it properly. Otherwise, the finance minister's anxiety would have been proven right. If we are not managing the statutory funds well, then we might as well bring it back into the consolidated fund.
Right.
If people are using statutory funds for purposes other than they were assigned for, then you might as well keep it in the options. We cannot do away with statutory funds, but our view is that we should eliminate the capping certain percentage of consolidated funds that goes into these statutory funds.
Right. No, well explained. And you want to develop a system to ensure that at least 50% of statutory funds is spent on government priority and transformational projects, and strengthen reporting on the application and use of such funds to avoid misapplication. I like the sustainability plan here. Usually the plan, we are able to hatch the plan well, we implement, but the sustainability of it and to monitor, to ensure the survival of it is usually the problem. And I'm happy that you're saying that, you are going to ensure that at least 50% of statutory funds is spent on government priority and transformational projects.
Yes. I mean, we don't want it to go back into the consolidated fund, because we are not sure that it will be used properly. So that was
maybe viewers may not appreciate. Some people may not appreciate what consolidated fund is.
Yes,
that all the monies that you make are put into a central pool
in a basket,
and then out of which you take small, you invest here, you take small, you invest here. So that is what it is.
That's the consolidated.
Yes. Those statutory ones created by statute.
By statute.
It's what we are saying that we should protect.
We should protect them because it's created by statute
for specific
use.
Yes.
We feel that Minister of Finance has the leverage
to spend as they will.
Now, but if that is the case, and we want to protect the integrity and the sanctity of statutory funds, then it imposes a liability on us. That's the GTP saying that then we have to make sure that the statutory funds are being used properly. You cannot eliminate the capping and then
misuse it.
Yeah. So now it's saying that if that is the case, and we protect if, for example, the District Akumo Assembly Fund is being used to finance activities that have no impact in terms of transformation on the economy, then it means that it is being used recklessly. And once we audit how these statutory funds are being used, then you would realize that some of the funds are being applied for purposes. So it means that they are being misapplied or being used. But this is saying that statutory funds must be applied to transformational projects.
Right.
So if we believe as a government that one district, one factory is a transformational project, if we believe that free SHS is a transformational project, if we believe that
1D, 1F,
well, yes, all those flagship transformational projects are important, then
what excites me, and we'll be going for a break shortly, but what excites me is also the fact that you are looking at specific funding sources, really being used for specific projects.
Yes,
because you are saying that we should also introduce appropriate policies. Okay, I think you've to ring fence and separate. You've explained that already.
Yes.
Now you're saying that we should only designated government transformational projects, budget funding amount from oil.
Now you are in line position for Minister of Finance.
Must be also used for specific governmental projects.
Yes.
It's
no, it's the same thing. They are applied or put into these the ABFA. Yeah. So what this proposal is saying that we must use once you do an audit in terms of the current use of the ADA funds, you realize the value of this proposal, because now it is being used.
We don't even know what it's being used for.
We don't even know what it's being used for.
We don't know.
And that is dangerous, because you are ring fencing funds for purposes of spending on activities that have no impact on the economy. So this is also saying that apart from the normal statutory funds, which we've discussed, the ABFA, which is also a ring-fenced amount from oil and gas proceeds, must also be used to fund only transformational projects.
Right. Yeah. More like cocoa board. The cocoa money, is it cocoa board? Yeah, the cocoa roots. More like using the cocoa money.
For example, if we determine that cocoa roots are transformational, then we can make a justification. So under no circumstances should
I get it.
ABFA
be limited to maybe specific things.
Yes.
As and when we see that this is transformational, this is a project that is good, then
we can use that too.
That's very brilliant.
Yes, it's very important.
So we can build schools with it, we can build hospitals with it,
as long as
roads with it.
Those projects
are transformational.
Are deemed to
Two
be
things before the break.
Yes.
Two things before the break. Two things. And if you can respectfully touch on them, I'll be very happy. Okay. Enhance ministerial oversight on capital expenditure in all MDAs to increase transparency in the award of public contracts within sector ministries and public agencies. I think you somehow touched on that.
Because that's unfortunate.
Absolutely,
because,
you touched on that.
I mean, capital expenditure sucks a lot of money.
Absolutely.
And so if there's no ministerial, the emphasis here is ministerial oversight. That ministers must, as in Ghanaian parlance, we say, must shine their eyes and must look into what the civil servants, the people in charge of managing the projects, what they are using, monies that are approved for ministries, what type of capital expenditure projects are they using the funds for. So just ensuring that there's ministerial oversight. If you're a minister and you don't have
to design and apply innovative project financing models such as build, operate transfer,
Yeah.
and PPP, private-public partnership, to finance public infrastructure projects and thereby reduce government capital expenditure. I mean, but the question that may be lingering on the minds of people is, how do you intend to do that? How would you be able to do that?
In fact, what this from taxes and from other sources to finance capital expenditure on infrastructure, then literally there will be no money left to do anything else.
Right.
Just imagine the demands on government in terms of public infrastructure, roads, rail, energy, water. Government does not earn enough to use public funds to finance public expenditure.
Right.
So we have to look for other sources
So
to build roads.
Partnerships.
And that's where the partnership comes in. Now let us invite the private sector to bring in the financing and the capital to finance expenditure on infrastructure which otherwise government would have funded. Why does government want to build all the roads? Why does government want to borrow to construct the railway?
Yeah.
Why does government want to borrow? You don't have the expertise in managing them. So why would you want to incur debt to finance infrastructure? Allow the private sector to bring in the capital and expertise and regulate them.
Right.
So it reduces government access. It is specifically meant for roads that cannot be towed. Every other road must be financed by the private sector and towed.
Brilliant idea. Quick break. Stay with us.
I say, you be who know me who be away. I say, dear cause of the so when I say, obi the coins to buy baby me. I say, the ref is a bit dry. I say, Alan Cash. I say, in this car coins upon wine. I say, and the car labash. I say, that's a blue and the bar. I say, never pie balu. I say, who I want nine it. I say, you want to work on boo. I say, hey, I say, I say, Munjai, I say. Plenty money for my bank. I say, for my bank. I say, I say, I dey come back. I say.
Welcome back. My name is Kwame Usudanso. The macroeconomic, the umbrella macroeconomic is very key. He will not be able to do them if he doesn't have the money. And so how will he be able to generate enough internally and externally to be able to optimization? And the first thing that comes to mind is tax.
Yes.
So you're going to generate a lot of revenue internally and perhaps meant that which you'll be able to generate internally. It's through taxes. Nobody likes to pay tax, particularly because we don't see what the monies are used for. Cover each and everybody so that you will be benefit of all Ghanaians.
Yeah. So, Kwame.
Yes, sir.
Revenue and expenditure are two sides of the same coin.
Right.
So it makes sense after talking about more revenue, then you can spend more. Now, so revenue is fundamental to every macro for the simple reason that if you want to extend your sources of revenue optimization or revenue mobilization, then as you rightly pointed out, generally speaking, it's through taxes. Now, but an enhanced tax regime to support productive investments in any economy. Any economy that has a high tax regime cannot tax. You can only so you need to have a balance, and that is why you have to expand what we call the tax net. So it's not a question of increasing the nominal taxes or the number of taxes. You can raise the same amount of the situation. Now, we know that currently only a few people who are designated within the tax bracket in the formal sector actually contribute to tax revenue. But so only a few people are paying taxes. But the argument we are making here is that if you expand, then you can have the same level of tax or even reduce the level of taxes, but have many more people who are paying. We know there are many professionals, including accountants, lawyers, doctors in private practice, who Ghana is essentially an informal sector, who are not caught in this tax net. And once you're unable to bring all, that's why the proposal is that don't expand the tax net, bring more economic operators into the tax net, and then you would end up having just to be able to earn more revenue. It's about revenue. You are creating a problem for the businesses who are the only ones paying tax. Expand the tax net.
Yeah. A lot of revenue from is the $1 million annually from the ports. And we're looking at under invoicing and some other surreptitious processes that the people, go through. And I'll say this on this program, that one of the reasons why I liked Ken Ofori-Atta in the beginning was his identification appointments committee, and he indicated that at the time he was going to ensure that we plug the loopholes and digitalize the place so that we'll be able to generate enough to augment. He was unable to do that.
Yes.
So how do we ensure that we plug the loophole so that we'll be able to, at the very least, get 200 pay the artisans and things like that? How would you be able to do? I've seen that you want to introduce AI, blockchain, and all of that. So explain further.
It's very important. Now, but the key is to make sure that you have the right system managing the leakages.
Right.
For many years, government after government has been complaining about the leak. Became Minister for Trade and Industry under President Akufo-Addo.
Right.
The first major project from the ports, the two go together. If you have an efficient trade facilitation mechanism, then you would improve your revenue generation. And so I introduced a new system called the Unipass, which is a South Korean trade. That there was a lot of backlash and a lot of negative comments that were made at that time against what I was trying to do, that I was bringing in a new system. I had signed off the existing one, complaining, freight forwarders were complaining, importers were complaining, but I stood my ground because, as you rightly pointed out, the technology that you are using, the biggest blessing to our country. I should be boasting about it.
Absolutely.
It's been the biggest blessing because can you imagine that this was introduced in 2020 in the midst of the COVID, which then was literally no economic activity. So it's a very difficult time to introduce it. Now, can you imagine, and just because of the limitation on time, 2019, at its peak, full production, full everything, we made 13.6 million Ghana cedis. 13.6 million Ghana cedis. And I introduced this new system around June 2020 in the midst of Congress. In the first 3 months after the introduction, we were able to earn 3 billion cedis more. First 3 months, just by changing the system, we earned 3 billion cedis more than the previous quarter. So then the matter speaks for itself as lawyers.
Yes.
You know, the matter speaks for itself. Now, as we speak now, look at the statistics. 2023, revenue from port operations has increased to over 30 billion. So from 13 billion to almost 32 billion. In 2023. So the evidence is very clear.
The issue of lack of compliance,
Yes.
you know, was one of the reasons why we're losing
some of system.
Right.
Because if you have the right system, the right risk engine,
automatically you are cutting. The point 3 talks about conducting a comprehensive financial and technical audit of port operations to identify and block revenue leakages, including but not limited to mechanisms to address trade misinvoicing, and that your policy, even though identifies the problem, tells you what it is going to do.
Yes.
You know, in highlighting the problem.
Yes.
And also finding the solutions.
Yes.
Do you understand?
I'm happy you've pointed, because this is a solution oriented.
Yes. And I'm very happy about it. And beyond that, you are saying that you will conduct a comprehensive review of the management and operations of the Ghana Revenue Authority with a view to enhancing the efficiency and
the new customs management system, more additional revenue. We need to look also at the institutional structure of it's not just a question of introducing a new system. Those who are managing the system must also be, if we restructure GRE and the VAT administration and other revenue. So that's what this is speaking to.
Right. And then you also want to enhance the collection of rent tax.
You seem to be in trouble.
Okay, for revenue, I think you've explained that already.
Yes.
This issue about rent tax, property tax rate, capital gains tax, investment income tax, and sin taxes. I remember the first time I heard sin tax, I started laughing. I said, that's not sin tax. You know, but you know, in the more advanced countries, in Ghana, you know, you have one bedroom house, and then Honorable Land says, Charlie, you have to pay property tax. You know, and all of that, and then the rent tax. You see, the young people after university, we are struggling small, you know, and obviously you have provided a solution in our previous conversation. But don't you think when you bring this rent tax, we will struggle more? Or you would find a way around it? Indeed.
We are talking about revenue optimization. And we are saying that we want to have a low tax regime at the same time.
All right, I get it.
It may seem contradictory. You want to have a low tax regime,
but also increase your revenue.
You also want to increase your revenue. So which can be validated in terms of its importance, which would affect productivity of the private sector, because there's a basket of taxes that you can impose. Some of them will reduce the competitiveness of businesses and one production, or even go out of businesses. But there are other taxes which you can collect which does not affect the economy in any way negatively, but rather increases your revenue. One of them is rent tax. You know, the concept of, if you rent your property, that is income to you as a landlord. You are supposed to pay
tax on that.
But how many landlords pay rent tax?
That's what I'm saying. They will offload it on the poor gentleman who has come to rent their property.
Well,
they will find a way of offloading that.
That's a good point.
Unfortunately.
That's a good point.
Unfortunately.
That's a good point. But you know, there's also what you call price elasticity. There's a point to which you cannot continue raising demand for your property. So within a reasonable limit, it's paid to you, just like everybody else. You should pay tax.
Income tax, yeah.
How do you expect government to finance? So all that this is saying is that it's competitive. Make sure that you collect taxes on income from rent. And also, property tax. It's true, like you're saying, you're a young man, you've managed to build your house, and you're supposed to pay tax. But indeed, the target is not really those who you are describing.
Right.
The target is the real estate, big companies, and then also individuals who have mansions and they have big properties and they've never paid taxes on it. So that is part of the problem.
I see capital gains tax here.
Yes.
I mean, sale of assets.
It's the same thing.
Okay.
When it's, you see, when you transfer property, you sell any
like maybe stocks, shares,
all those things,
collectibles, and those ones.
Absolutely. And that's also income coming to you,
right,
from trading in those stocks or whatever. So why do you want somebody else to pay tax? Those ones, government has every right to enforce revenue collection, tax collection,
right,
from these sources.
I mean, as part of revenue mobilization or revenue optimization, you are looking at restructuring the road toll system.
Yes.
And, so that we can generate more. I've often queried why we do not use the road tolls to benefit other sectors. I do know that, yes, we are supposed to use it to fix the roads and things like that. But there are some other areas that personally paid toll.
Your one city.
Or that, but I lived in Tema for so many years and I could count the number of times I used that. So if in a day I shuffled between Accra and Tema 5 times, that's 5 cities.
Yes,
and that's me alone.
Yeah, I understand.
I'm saying there are several other people, big cars and things like that. And at the last check, I don't really recall, but at the last check, I was told that daily, just on the Tema Accra motor, we're making around, is it 100 and something thousand cities a day?
Okay.
Just on
the
I mean, and how many times do we have potholes on our roads?
Yes.
So those monies, how do we account for those monies? What do we use those monies for, really? Because if we are using it to fix just the Tema, we are saying that we are using it to fix just the Tema Accra motorway.
Yes.
We have got to borrow money to come and to complete, the Accra Tema motorway.
Yes.
And so those monies that we generated prior to the cancellation of those routes, what did we use it for? So you are saying that you want to relook at it and perhaps, make sure that we generate more and then use it country.
But the interesting slant to this, though,
right? Okay,
is that we have to understand that unless we charge what I will call decent rates in terms of road tolls, it is not possible for government either to maintain the roads or to apply it to other areas that you are proposing. The proposal even makes it more compelling that we should, because that's exactly what this is talking about.
Yes.
So it is something that we need to consider seriously if we want to use it for road maintenance and also, as you've suggested, apply it to other uses.
Yes.
We have to enhance the collection of road tolls and expand the application across various road networks.
Which is essentially what I'm talking about.
What you're talking about.
Yes.
So, for example,
because I would be happy.
Feeder roads, yes.
I'll be happy.
It's almost like you are paying more to go on the motorway so that we can fix the roads that would reduce the cost of transportation for foodstuffs and then will reduce food prices and food inflation. Yes.
So you see, you solved my problem for me. You have solved my problem for me. You have solved my problem for me. You see, you understand the problem, sir. Right.
Makes a lot of sense.
Absolutely. And then this luxury taxes.
I'm sure you're against it.
Because
you drink champagne.
I don't have a luxury vehicle yet.
Yes, okay.
Hopefully I get one soon. Yeah. And so that I'll pay. Because I want to pay.
Yes,
but I need a luxury vehicle, and then I'll be able to pay. Maybe LX 570. I like that vehicle. Anyway, introduce and sustain will generate some more revenue to augment the others that will.
Yes.
So, obviously, I think it's quite
speaking to the fact that we want to increase taxes, but we want to increase taxes that will not affect the economy in terms of private sector competitiveness. But clearly, if you increase taxes on luxury items, then in a sense one would say that it's affecting individuals who have money and they can pay. They can afford it. That will not affect the efficiency and rather reduce taxes on other areas.
Which is brilliant. I like this thing about Freeport Enclave. And in Togo, they have free ports. I know a lot of Ghanaians ship their vehicles through Togo and then they clear it and then they pay something small and then, and I like the fact that you want to introduce that in Ghana. Have you looked at the negative effects of it and the positives to see whether or not the introduction of it will, even though will bring about some revenue optimization, but also would not come and affect, this issue of dumping, the dumping system, where everybody will seize the opportunity to come and dump anything in Ghana. Have you looked at
it's a very interesting comment in the sense that there seems to be some confusion in people's minds about talking about a free port and at the same using that as a means of mobilizing more revenue.
Right.
Now the explanation is that when you have a free port, essentially you are attracting a lot of vessels into your port. A free port essentially is a transshipment port. A free port is essentially a transshipment port. So vessels come into the free port because no taxes are paid, particularly when you are transshipping the goods to other destinations.
Right.
And that is why if you take Singapore, Hong Kong, Shanghai, all those free ports, Dubai, are very important vehicles for economic development because into other destinations. So the money that you earn from shipping services due to increased vessel traffic is what would increase revenue mobilization. So it's not contradictory. If you want to offload into the country, then you have to pay duty. If you want to offload the goods into your country, then you have to pay. But the reason why Togo then becomes attractive is that because it's a free port, a lot of vessels go into the Togo port for transshipment. But let's be careful. Some of the goods that
that's why I was looking at the other effects of it.
Yes, absolutely.
But because you're going to have a tight legal regime,
absolutely, for a free port,
some of these.
Because once you offload the goods in a free port into the economy, then into an economy for which there are duties to be paid.
Which means you have to pay.
You have to pay.
Quick break. Stay with us. We'll be back shortly.
I say, you be who know me who be away. I say, the echoes of the air, so when I say, Obi the coins to buy, you may. I say, the ref is a bit jarring. I say, Alan Cash, I say. In this car, call us up on wine, I say. And the car labash, I say. That's a blue and the bar, I say. Never buy balu, I say. My hand in the bride, I say. Everything I do, I say. Before shine your eye, I say. Before you shine your shoe, I say. Where I want nine it, I say. You want to wear bamboo, I say. Hey, I say. I say. Munjai, I say. I say. I dey come like Alan Cash, I say. Alan Cash, I say. Plenty money for my bank, I say. For my bank, I say. I say. I say. Munjai, I say. I say. I dey come like Alan Cash, I say.
Now we're coming to look at lower taxes and duties. Makes me happy. We're going to lower taxes and the payment of duties. Because if you are in Abusokai, I'm sure you are right now you are reeling from the increment in taxes, especially at the ports. And I'm excited that Honorable Alan Martin has captured this quite forcefully. On this occasion, duties. I don't want to interrupt you. I just want to allow you to explain to the viewers very quickly.
Very well. I mean, lower taxes are critical for every economy, and it's one of the most important macroeconomic indicators. In Ghana, our tax regime is very high, and it makes our economy unattractive for investments. So what the GTP is saying is that our target is to become the lowest tax regime in ECOWAS,
Right.
to attract more investments. So how are we going to do this? It means that we have to abolish a number of taxes, our import levy of 2%. We would also abolish the COVID-19 health recovery level. For Christ's sake, COVID has been over for how many years now? What is the basis for charging the COVID-19 health levy? So that will be abolished.
The explanation was that, respectfully, was that we are still paying some COVID vaccines that we were given. I remember the last time that was the explanation I was given. I don't know whether it is true or not.
Yes, but
yeah,
we have to be careful that we are not passing on certain inefficiencies within the management architecture of this COVID pandemic onto consumers or onto taxpayers. Yes, you may still be paying for vaccines and so on and so forth, but to a large extent, there is no relevance for this in our current administration, looking at how long we've had to deal with it. There are other sources of, I would say, income that you must use to deal with whatever additional expenses you have to cover from COVID. It doesn't have to be a COVID levy. So at what point are you going to
stop? Yeah.
You can always use that as a justification.
It's like ESLA.
It's like ESLA. But even in ESLA, you can understand that we made certain commitments to some independent power producers.
Okay.
And those are contractual obligations. You cannot avoid that.
But, I'm saying it's like ESLA by reason of what government said. I mean,
health service disinfection fee. Again, for Christ's sake, what are we disinfecting?
Flies.
I like that.
Yeah, I believe
so that will also be abolished. Then also, the cost of spare parts is a major. If we reduce the cost associated with bringing in spare parts, we can also reduce the cost of transportation. So here, the proposal is to abolish all taxes and other charges on the importation of spare parts. But we said within 2 years of the establishment of the government of national unity, that's if Alan becomes president. We are saying within 2 years because you also don't want to undermine the current revenue mobilization regime by doing it instantly, let's say, on coming into but within a period of 2 years, you would have been able to sanitize the environment to be able to block leakages and earn more revenue from other sources, including what we've already discussed.
Indeed.
So that the continuing imposition of duties and charges on spare parts would not be necessary. Dating all statutory fees and charges into Ghana. Authority agencies, regulatory fees. It is important that we pay fees. Proposal being made is that easier burden on importers, so that you don't have to be running around to all these agencies and then another major proposal, Ghanaians, is to, and then we have a VAT regime of 12.5%.
Yes.
In the previous dispensation, the 12.5% VAT levy, which is 2.5%, and then get fund levy, which is another 2.5%. So together, I did a service for purpose on. Now the Ministry of Finance apply 12.5% VAT to the service, 200 cedis. Then they apply NHIA 2.5 on the 12.5 on the service, and then after that get the total, and then come and calculate another 2.5 get fund on the total of the VAT plus the NHIA, and then another consolidated figure of 17.5, which is applied directly. But if you it actually means that you are applying a levy on the VAT, and then you apply another levy on the VAT plus another levy plus another levy. So this is actually killing our companies and individual VAT and levies in the economy.
All right. Not too soon, we've come to the end of part 1 of this economic conversation on Alan Speaks. My name is Kwame Owusu Danso. Thank you for watching today's edition. We'll be back next week. Stay with us.